All right, good morning. Welcome to the May 21st MARG meeting. This is the Multidisciplinary Advocates and Researchers Group. We meet every third Thursday from 9 to 10 a.m. And this is if you're watching this, it's recorded on YouTube, but those are the times that we meet live where you can ask questions and interact live with our presenters and our group. This morning, we have a very exciting presentation. And I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Sharayla Haynes. I'm the Community Partners Project Manager here at Frontiers, our Clinical Translational and Science Institute. And this morning's presentation is Fostering Mutually Beneficial Community Research Partnerships, Reflections from Detroit. We have Dr. Kathryn R. Berringer here. She comes to KU from the University of Michigan, where she completed her PhD in the Joint Doctoral Program in Social Work and Anthropology in spring 2024. Her research explores paradoxes inherent in contemporary LGBTQ plus social movement work in the U.S., particularly in the face of escalating anti-LGBTQ political mobilization. For the past 5 years, she has been involved in a long-term community-based partnership with an LGBTQ plus youth center in Detroit, where she conducts ethnographic research. Her teaching experience includes teaching graduate social work courses and undergraduate anthropology courses at the University of Michigan. Berringer worked for 2 years as a research project coordinator and supportive service coordinator at the Chicago Center for HIV Elimination and previously worked in HIV prevention and linkage to care in Washington, D.C. She earned her master's degree in social service administration from the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration and holds a bachelor's in religion from Carleton College. Who is joining her today is Dwayne Cole, who is a Youth Action Board member from Every Soul Arts. Please welcome both of them. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us. Is everybody able to see our slides okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, wonderful. Well, yes, thank you so much, Sharayla. I'm Dr. Kathryn Berringer, and I'll invite my co-presenter, Dwayne, to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Dwayne. You can call me that professionally, but artistically call me D'Angelo. And yes, I am like a youth action board member for Every Soul Arts, but in addition to that, I do also do a little bit of work with other nonprofits like Breaking Walls. And I'm in some other ventures outside of that too. I do some photography and graphic design, but happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So our goal today is to share a bit about our work together, our partnership, and lessons we've learned from crafting mutually beneficial partnerships, both organizational partnerships between researchers and organizations, and personal partnerships. So first, we'll share a bit about the organization where we met, which is an LGBTQ youth center in Detroit, Michigan, and the work that we both did there, and especially focusing on the challenges in entering research-saturated communities, avoiding parachuting in and out of research communities, and forming really intentional partnerships. And then we'll talk about a project we developed together that we called the Fab History Project, that we're hoping to continue in Fab 2.0. And that combined archival research, film, and oral history interviews. And then we'll share some lessons that we've learned from engaging in community research partnerships. So first, we wanted to share a little bit about the context where we met and began our collaboration, this LGBTQ Youth Center in Detroit. This photograph is of the drop-in space at that center. So we thought the best way to do that would be for us to kind of introduce ourselves and the ways we came to this space and the work that we engaged in there. So Dwayne, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, so this picture brings back memories. Because baby, because I started coming to this space in around 2016, I'd say. 2016, fresh out of high school. Just came out of the closet, having to go into adulthood right after high school. And at that time, I really did feel like alone a lot. So I had a best friend who realized that like I needed a space, some getaway to get out of the house. I was going through a lot of things at home when it comes to like identifying as a Black gay male in Detroit. So I just needed a getaway. And my friend was telling me about this the center, and how queer folks were able to come there, be themselves. They were able to get like resources, different things like that. And I needed that getaway, honestly. And once I actually started coming there around like 2016, to start utilizing some of the resources and the programs that the center had to offer, because they had like a lot. They used to do food, they had like clothing closet, a lot of different resources. So one of the programs that they actually had that I attended was called Out in the System. Um, and at the time, like I was going through some things with the Child Protective Services. Me and my family were kind of trying to navigate that system. So this program kind of just sparked a little bit of passion for me because of the fact that um, I needed to I needed to get some type of knowledge about the CPS system. I just needed to have some type of information. Just at that time, because of how close they were to what was going on with my family. I don't want to go into too many details about that, but I joined the program, and then once I joined the Out in the System program, I actually had a blast. Just learning about like the different processes that takes place, I guess, in the CPS system, but also about myself as like a newly out LGBTQ person. So from there, I was a part of that program. Then I actually moved over to their youth advisory board program. So I was a member of that, and that's where we kind of just discussed different things that were going on in the center, different things that were going on in the community, and from there they actually got like, I guess, like a little taste of my work ethic and a lot of the things that I did. Uh and like I'm just really passionate about youth empowerment. I'm passionate about just community work in general. I'm passionate about just helping. I don't know, I'm just a very helpful person. So from there they actually asked that I apply for their part-time position as a peer leader. So I actually became a worker of the actual center. And then I actually started providing some of those resources and services to like my peers, my community and stuff like that. Um, and to kind of like go through all the rigmarole, like I worked through their leadership pipeline. I then became, after the peer leader, I became a development associate. So I ended up working in their communications department, helping with fundraising, different things like that. And then during my time there, I actually became a facilitator, like the lead facilitator for the youth advisory board. So the meetings that I actually started to attend as a member, I then became like the facilitator for. Then from there, I became the youth programs manager. So then I started to really just focus on the programming involved with like youth empowerment, trying to get youth to get positive development, different things like that. And then really trying to like cultivate different partnerships and relationships with donors, with different companies, acting pretty much as like the liaison for community members, staff members, donors, different things like that. And when it came to doing that work, like the center was a place that like was pretty rare for its time. I think around like before 2020, it was like very scarce to kind of find spaces for LGBTQ young folks to really like be themselves, express themselves. So it was a place where like people would come from all over the country. Like I've met so many different people. I have so many amazing connections, and think that leads to me actually meeting Katie around this time, because she's one of those people that, I don't know, one of those amazing people that I met like over the years. So I'll give it over to her.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I was one of those people who had heard about the center even before I moved to Michigan to start my PhD, as a place with a reputation for a model of a grassroots community center. So really started around that initial drop-in space in the first photo, and then built out to build a health and wellness clinic, housing programs. This is a new site that was being conceived of and built while over 10 years from before I started, and then we broke ground while I was there. But so I was really interested in how this center was growing from this small community space to this kind of much larger organization with all around the city. Um, and at the same time, I was really interested in the policy change work that they were doing. So this connects to the Out in the System program that Dwayne was talking about. This is a photo of Governor Gretchen Whitmer signing an executive order banning conversion therapy at the press conference at the center. So they were doing this kind of direct service work, but also these efforts to engage in policy change across systems of care where LGBTQ young people experience harm, like the child welfare system, foster care system, juvenile justice system, housing system. So when I first approached the center in 2017, so right around kind of a year after Dwayne had first started working with the center, I was really interested in this as a potential research site for this PhD program I was in anthropology and social work, but also as a place to do direct service work. So as Shirley was mentioning in the my introduction, like for the 10 years before I started my PhD program, I'd always been involved in HIV service organizations, in community-based nonprofits, and I, being exclusively in the classroom, I was feeling really isolated and really wanted to be able to do direct service work and form relationships in Detroit, get out of kind of Ann Arbor and the ivory tower of Ann Arbor. So I actually started working, I think when I first met Dwayne, I was a volunteer folding clothes in the clothing closet. So I was very honored that that was the first role that I was, that they deemed me fashionable enough to manage the clothing donations at the clothing closet. But then the center as an organization was a really protective space for researchers. So they were really inundated with requests from researchers who wanted to, as well as filmmakers and documentarians, so all kinds of people who are interested in engaging the young people at the center, either as research participants or who are interested kind of documenting the rich social life of the center, documenting voguing, the ballroom community. There were kind of constantly requests coming in, so much so that the center actually put together a Google form for people who wanted to request to come in and do research or film, and usually just sent out kind of form letter rejections. So it was, as a really research saturated community, the organization had kind of developed these mechanisms to protect the space from people who might kind of parachute in and out. There was someone who Dwayne and I worked with in the youth advisory board who would say, you know, people are always coming in with their little $20 in the survey. That was kind of the model for the ways that people would approach the center to do research. And they really weren't interested in that kind of work. But at the same time, especially as these programs were growing, the center was really interested in in researchers who wanted to contribute to the work and the mission of the center. And at the time that I started volunteering there, they had just received a huge 5-year federal grant to evaluate and research programs for LGBTQ affirming interventions in the child welfare system. And they really needed a part-time data manager to work on that project, and someone who would be invested over 5 years, but who could kind of and could bring skills and resources from the University of Michigan. So they were excited to partner with me in that way, and in doing that work for me eventually to be able to do my own ethnographic anthropological dissertation research there. So I was starting to kind of form that research connection. But especially as an outsider, as someone who was new to Detroit as a white woman, it was really important for me to think about kind of my positionality in that research and how I was approaching the research I was going to do. And it was really important to me that I was not focusing on observing or researching or studying young people receiving services, but the programming itself, the organization itself, practitioners at the center, people who were positioned like me as social workers, medical providers, and the ways that they were building and expanding these programs. And at the same time, I really wanted to make sure that I was centering the voice of people with lived experience. And there were so many people who were had lived experience and were in kind of dual roles as peer leaders, as youth advisory board members. And Dwayne was exemplified that, and also was the kind of the liaison between young people at the center, between the youth advisory board, between funders, people who were visiting. So Dwayne and I started to work together and kind of formed a friendship, and were kind of constantly at the center. And I was really interested in developing a collaboration with Dwayne and with youth advisory board members, or former advisory board members, which is where the FAB acronym came from, these former advisory board members. So eventually I approached Dwayne to see if there was a project that we could work on together. And that's where the kind of FAB History Project came. So the FAB History Project really emerged out of an exploration of the history of this building, which was the kind of main site of the center when Dwayne and I were there in 2017 and on. So this looks like a really kind of nondescript post-industrial corridor, like building in maybe from the 90s, but it actually was built around the time that Highland Park, which is an enclave city surrounded on all sides by Detroit, that's kind of a microcosm of Detroit. It was founded at the time that there was this huge Ford factory that was actually the very first assembly line automotive factory in the world. And in 1916, it was the largest manufacturing site in the world. And the center was actually a brick theater building that was built around that time. This is another postcard from the 20s of the Ford Motor Company at the time. And there were, within the walls of that building, there were some kind of relics of that time, of the different ways that this theater building had been used. So this was something that was found in the walls when they were building the clinic at the center, that had been from when the space had been used as by a Croatian singing society. In 1939. So that really fascinated me. So I ended up doing some searches of digitized newspaper records and found that this was the original artifact, the original facade of the building. So very different from what it became once there was a kind of like in the 90s, I think they put up some like plastic on the front. But this had been the building when it was built at the time. And I was able, through the Detroit Free Press records, to find all of these records of different ways the center had been used. So this is when it was used by stokermen in a union from the Highland Park school district, who were voting on whether to call a strike at the center. They had been used as a kind of union hall. We also found records where it had been used as a boxing club, it had been used as an immigrant clubhouse, and really as a site for different immigrant groups to exchange and have kind of performances of cultural exchange. So this Mexican dance troupe was invited in by this Croatian clubhouse to perform. There were dances and concerts and different kinds of assemblies. And then later on, it was used again as a labor union hall, both from auto workers and education workers. So at the very first meeting that Dwayne and I had with this FAB group, with this former advisory board group, I shared these newspaper clippings with people and was like, is this history interesting? Is there a project that we could develop out of this? I don't know, Dwayne, if you have memories from that first meeting.
Oh yeah, most definitely. A lot of people were excited about this too, because with being in a space that services the community, and of course, like when you are working with marginalized communities, it can you tend, like, you build a family essentially. Like, you know, these people, you know them by name. Like, these are people you see outside of it. Like, these are my peers, friends, family, and stuff like that. So for them to be able to hear about the history of the building that we've been like occupying for the programming and stuff, like it was really shocking to a lot of people, because it was like, oh wow, this space used to be used for entertainment purposes. They used to throw parties, they used to dance and do all of these different things. And it was really like astonishing for a lot of people to see how the space kind of evolved over the years, but still has that same kind of like sense of belonging, the dancing, the parties, the music. And honestly, I ain't even gonna hold you up. You know how any family is, even the fights at times, like it's the passion. So when they did kind of see the history behind the building, I think that really like piqued a lot of people's interest. So when a lot of the young folks did like hear about that, that's really when like we got into the thick of trying to like create a program that was mutually beneficial for young people as well as for Katie and all the work that she was doing.
Yeah, so that meeting was so great. So we decided we would kind of work on this history project and see where it took us. And folks were also interested in incorporating film into this and like filming the building itself, the neighborhood around the building, in filming interviews with staff and with community elders, with the co-founders of the center. So we thought, we can incorporate some kind of film project into this too. So one of our first meetings once we formed this group was actually with my advisor in the Department of Anthropology at Michigan, Damani Partridge, who also works as an ethnographic filmmaker and teaches ethnographic filmmaking classes in Detroit and in Berlin, and kind of leads community engaged ethnographic film collectives in both places. So he came in and talked with young people about what ethnographic filmmaking and really about basic skills and methods for filmmaking in general, and kind of shared some of the films that he developed in Detroit and in Berlin. So
and that that meeting actually was like it was one of those core memories that I had too, because in addition to like the work that I do like with nonprofits and stuff, I also, like I was saying earlier, do photography and graphic design. So like one of those like core memories that I have about like even to this day as a photographer, I think about that meeting was the first time I ever really like learned some of the basics when it comes to photography, like the rule of thirds with composition, and like golden hour, different things like that. I feel like I've always been an artist, but I know for sure that like that meeting, and I don't know if it was just because seeing like a person of color like in that field doing that type of work, I don't know if that might have been it, like representation or something, but it's definitely a core memory of mine that I always go back to because it's like, I don't know. And just thinking about how I've evolved ever since then, like I'm super appreciative of like Katie for even setting that up and like the work we did with this program. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so then once we had kind of established what we were going to do, we actually took a trip to the Detroit Public Library's Burton Historical Collection to try to find more about the history of the building in the neighborhood from the archives that hadn't been digitized. So we had this day where we went and kind of poured over these old boxes of newspapers from Highland Park. And I think that experience we ended up having a lot of conversations about the nature of the archives. So while the Detroit newspaper archives had been digitized and were really accessible, those archives of newspapers from Highland Park were like falling apart in our hands as we were kind of turning the pages. And we'd heard that a lot of the archives from Highland Park are actually still in this old library. So I mentioned a little bit about Highland Park, but it really is kind of a microcosm of Detroit. It was a city that actually Henry Ford founded in a tax scheme to protect the tax base of his factory. So it was intentionally built not to kind of protect tax money from the factory from going to Detroit. But when the factories in Highland Park closed in the 90s, it lost 80% of its budget. It experienced more depopulation than other parts of Detroit. And many of the institutions, like the school system, closed for a while. The police department was operating outside of a strip mall, and the police department had shut down in different ways. But this was this really grand public library that's in the center of Highland Park. Some of these oral history interviews, we heard stories about people going there as a child and just the grandeur of this library. And now it's been closed, and even this really beautiful front door has been shuttered with plywood that then was turned into a mural to celebrate the history of the city. So it's a really kind of interesting place. But we'd heard that the archives there are still many of the archives from Highland Park are still in this library, kind of under tarps and under a falling roof. So thinking about kind of how the archives of Highland Park are connected to this history of Detroit.
Yeah. And I think like another thing too, like once we were doing the work, a thought that kind of came to mind for me was about the importance of like preserving a lot of that information and the history that might be in those places. Because I think like just to think about like the wealth of knowledge that's like in libraries and things like that. And with us gaining that experience through the program when it comes to like exploring the archives and stuff, it just made me really think about the importance of how an entire like just wealth of knowledge can be like missing, and then how important it is for us to really try to like preserve that from our own experiences, as well as like looking into like the wells that we have that we could probably like use for knowledge, like when it comes to intergenerational discussions, different things like that. And especially like nowadays, like in a world with like AI and all the other stuff, like it's just really important that I think we get those like organic and like more natural ways of like finding information, because we don't know like what narratives might shift in the future. So that's just something I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, we had we had lots of conversations while we were having this about kind of this importance of this history. So then we also incorporated this kind of film element. I had access to professional film equipment from the University of Michigan, so I would rent those out and kind of schlep them up from Ann Arbor to Detroit in my Chevy hatchback, and then we would kind of use that to film the neighborhood, to film the building itself, and to film 3 oral history interviews that we did with Highland Park elders and with the founders of the center, talking about both finding the building, the history that they had heard of the building, but also the history of the organization, the history of Highland Park, and the history of LGBTQ organizing in the city that led to the formation of this center and this organization. And in each of those film projects, like different people took on different skills, had different things they were interested in. So yeah, I don't know if Dwayne, you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So another thing, like, because we have been doing like a lot of research, we were learning a lot about history, but and I think like that research and history kind of aspect of it was a passion of Katie's. And I know at the time, and like just how I am as a person, I'm always thinking of ways to like help develop skills for other people, or like really try to think of like other ways. How can we make this tangible? How can we make this something that we can put on a sheet of paper, something that we could look back on? So for me, a big thing was trying to like work with the interest of the young folks at the time. So like seeing what they wanted to do, and like really just seeing that spark in everyone to like say like, hey, I want to do the sound management. I want to do the camera holding. I want to be one of the interviewers. That's why in like a few of the photos you see like myself and a couple other young folks, because those were the ones that like designated that they wanted to be like interviewers. Or so like just kind of like seeing a lot of the spark that came from different people. I love spaces that allow for people to work on their interests and their passion. So like it was super dope to kind of see everyone like pick the roles that worked for them, and then seeing how passionate and like how enticed they were when it came to like, I want to do this work. Like they were super like into it. And I just love seeing that from like a lot of the board members.
Yeah, it really kind of evolved around the things that people were interested in, and the like people developed passions for sound that I wasn't expecting to see. So yeah, so that's a kind of a little bit about this project that we worked on. I think over about 2 years. Well, that you might have noticed the mass that was also kind of interrupted at different times by the pandemic. But we wanted to kind of think about if a Fab History Project was a mutually beneficial partnership, like what were the benefits? So yeah.
And as I kind of talked about like a little bit earlier, was seeing like the different roles that everyone played. And then like, of course, I feel like in community, you're always gonna have like the roles and the positions that help to keep the community going. But a big thing that I even use to this day, like even with my work with ESA and like the peers that I work with through that work, or even like with Breaking Walls, I like to always consider us as like Avengers. I don't know. I like superheroes. So like this is a metaphor I'll use. Like, but I like to always say like we're modern day Avengers. So like in the times where one of us may feel a little down and out, like you also have like a team of people to also fill in the blanks when you feel like you can't do it. So seeing people kind of identify the roles that like worked for them, and then seeing everybody be able to like collaborate with one another is like something that's really, really like high up there for me to make sure that we do in any type of collaboration. So that was super nice to see. And then also, as I was saying before, like the tangible skill sets, like seeing that people actually can get that experience from doing like these different things was super nice to see. And especially coming from a space of like marginalized communities, you know, like people really don't give a lot of people the chances to actually like showcase those skill sets. So sometimes it does take like a high level of like trust to be able to be like, okay, I trust that you'll be able to do this. And then like we'll work together, like we'll learn together, we'll like experiment, do things together. And I think like that's more so the human part of a lot of these things. And I think in some spaces they tend to forget like mistakes happen, but us as a team, we should be able to work on this together. And I think that's when relationships and things like that are super important. So
Yeah, and for me, definitely the greatest benefit of this partnership was the relationships that were formed through it. So this really became, this all was kind of separate from my dissertation research, but really became the foundation of the relationships I had with people that then supported this long-term ethnographic participant observation research. So all of the relationships I formed there became ones that were a part of my future work and collaborations. And that it also kind of established this foundation for future projects. So like Dwayne and I mentioned, I'll be coming back to Detroit this summer. There are other folks that I'm working with, including community elders, one of the co-founders from the center, who's really interested in preserving these histories, especially at this moment where there's so much threat of erasure of LGBTQ histories, of Black histories, the importance of preserving those oral histories. So Dwayne and I are actually collaborating with another community elder to think about reforming a new Fab 2.0 and bringing and creating a program or piloting a program to train young people to conduct oral history interviews. So we're hoping to work with like historians and archivists and to bring other people into this team to form our kind of new Avengers team and think about how to provide young people with skills and resources to be able to document and preserve these histories. Yeah, I was just going to share a little bit, this hasn't really been about my research, but a little bit about the ways that this became a kind of foundation for my ethnographic research. So in addition to the work I was doing, collaborating with organization on this child welfare grant and collaborating with any kind of this project with FAB, I was also engaged in my own long-term ethnographic research of the center and its growth over time and LGBTQ movements more broadly and the kind of tensions that practitioners were experiencing at the center. And that involved over 120 in-depth interviews, and a lot of the relationships I'd formed through FAB really at the core of being able to have those interviews with people, both the kind of connecting to people from FAB, but also having people be able to connect me to other folks because we kind of built the trust through that. And so I think for those, like the relationships are really at the center of the key takeaways for us, for the importance of centering relationship and building trust. And that takes a very long time, but also it requires a kind of focus on process over outcomes. So I think this process would have looked really different if I had an idea of what the outcomes had to be from the very beginning and had come to the youth advisory board and said, I want to do this so we can create this film, this kind of film, or we can write this kind of paper together. I was really being open to how this project would take shape by focusing on the process and establishing these relationships. and thinking about creating something that everyone would be getting something out of, and that would be kind of following everyone's interests and passions and objectives.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think like the way that we did it, through like our own individual passions, like Katie's passion for history, my passion for like youth development, I think it kind of happened naturally so that we did end up creating a process, but at the same time also achieving outcomes that we wanted to see. And with that, I do think like that's the process that kind of worked for us, but there is like no cookie cutter way of doing it. I think like whenever you enter any space, I think it's important to also like know what your goal is, but at the same time try to create space to be your authentic self and follow your own passions and interests. Because I do think like when it comes to a lot of work, we may look for the people who have like the best credentials or things like that, or like who may look nice on paper but lack that passion. But I think it's important to always try to like follow your interest and follow your passion, because that way it'll never feel like a job. I do feel like Katie kind of like just slid in there out of nowhere, because like we met and it kind of was just like organic, and then we hit it off. And like it was a point in time where like I didn't even know that Katie even was doing a lot of the work that she was doing during that timeline. Like I just thought like she was a cool volunteer that used to come up to the center. I'm like, I just love Katie. And then we actually met and actually took time to discuss like our roles at the center, and it was like, wow, like let's actually collaborate by this. So I think like we started off with like just cultivating a real nice relationship, and then going from there because of our passions, which then led us to creating a program about like the importance of art preservation and things like that. So I'm super excited for what's to come with Fab 2.0. And the fact that we did create that process allows for us to continue to like bear seeds from the fruit of what we created, essentially. So it'll grow into something bigger and better if we do continue to like do what we're doing. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for letting us share some of these reflections, and we'd love to hear if there are any questions that folks have. We have a little bit of time left, so thank you so much.
Wow.
This is
That was great.
Kevin. I have a couple comments. They're not so much questions as they are comments. Two things. One is so often I hear researchers say that the mutual collaboration is the agency will benefit from the research that'll eventually come out, but not from the process. So the fact that you wanted the agency to benefit from the process as much from the research, I think makes you a hero in my book, and I really, really respect your approach. Thank you so much, Katie, for being so proactive. The other thing that was going to be my question, which you've already answered, is in this time of hostility for funding and research for LGBTQIA+ issues, how are you going to preserve the research and the project? And you've discussed that. I hear so many people trying to work around what's happening right now. I'll give an example. There's someone who wants to work on smokers of color, and they can't get funding, so they find out that a lot of smokers of color are casual smokers, so they're working on casual smoking, and so they're addressing that. But at the end of the day, we don't have research on smokers of color. We have research on casual smokers, and that generation of research is still going to be lost. You're still trying to preserve these stories, so so I'm really just being a big mutual admiration society, and I'm a really snappy sort of guy. So I just wanted to say thank you.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, I think I hadn't thought about it in that way, that the kind of moving into this direction in developing this 2.0 version, that focusing on oral histories, is really in reaction to this moment. And I mean, I benefit in some ways as an ethnographer that I'm not relying on large NIH grants. my heart really goes out to people who are doing the work like Sharella's doing to make it work to be able to continue to fund this research. But it definitely is in response to this moment that I think I'm really hearing from my community partners that preserving these histories in the face of erasure is so important right now.
And I'm going to sneak in before Emily really quick and say, first of all, thank you both for giving your time to us. Emily, I know I'm trying to cut you in line, Emily. I had a question for Dwayne. Did you already have a perception of the University of Michigan before you started working with Kathryn? And if you did, can you talk a little bit about that perception, and did it change at all or did it remain the same? I know you were really young, but I didn't know if that was something that you already had.
Yeah, I feel like I did have a perception. Like, I think a lot of times I do think when it comes to research and surveys, like I think people think a lot about just the quantity. Like they just think about the data and the statistics, and they don't really think much about like the person behind the number. So that was kind of my perception at first, where it was like, oh, people are gonna come in, they're gonna do their internships, they're gonna leave, they're like kind of like, okay, whatever. And I feel like that's what the center kind of defended a lot of its community from. So I do appreciate them for that. But Katie definitely like made it a 180. And I know like y'all see Kathryn, but I call her Katie. So that's why, yeah. But Katie, like she definitely did a whole 180 for me because like I was saying, I didn't know like she even did anything when it came to research. And I think that's why it's important for establishing that connection and being your authentic self. Because everyone just knows her as like the smiley volunteer with the glasses, like in the black hair. And it was a point in time when it was like 3 Katie's. So yeah, she definitely changed my perception with her process and with her care and her patience. So I appreciate her for that.
Thank you for sharing that. Emily, I won't cut you anymore.
No, you were right. That was the right thing to do. Thank you. I was going to ask a question. I also should disclose that I am a member of the Katie Berringer fan club, but I wanted to say that I was curious about when you were talking about the sort of like importance of, which I completely agree with, the importance of not trying to name the outcome before you head into whatever the partnership's going to look like. And I understand that like working within a system of a university or funding agency or something like that, that is usually kind of like they want to know what the outcome's going to be, or at least what you think it's going to be. So I'm curious how you navigated that sort of ambiguity of allowing for something to come from it, either in terms of, or maybe both, in terms of like how you were working with community, how you were framing what could come from it, but at the same time, how you talked back to funders to say, here's possibility or something like that, I guess. Just curious where you, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, because those constraints are really real. And I think people don't like to hear, I'm going to do something and I'm not sure what it is, but I'll be investing in relationships and I'm sure it'll be important. And actually the FAB 1.0 was funded through a public scholarship grant from the University of Michigan that had all kinds of constraints. I'm sure Dwayne remembers all of the forms we had to fill out just so people could be paid and compensated to do this work. There was a lot of running around to try to figure out how to get things approved. So there was a kind of blog. There was work that I was doing with the University of Michigan and blog posts I had to write as a part of this project. But I was lucky that, especially as a PhD student, there weren't a lot of constraints on what the actual tangible product had to be. And I think I'm also really lucky being in the School of Social Welfare here at KU, because I think the kind of work that I do does take a long time, and the kind of work that ethnographers do in general takes a long time and often produces different kinds of scholarly products, especially things that are public facing. And yes, I can post that blog post as well. Or maybe follow up with you over email. It'll take a minute to find it before the next 5 minutes. But the School of Social Welfare actually, I think, is a really great example in that we are thinking a lot here about how to value public scholarship, public-facing scholarship, and community-engaged scholarship in the same way. So, for example, some of the archival work I'm doing in Detroit both through this new oral history project and working with the organization to archive the organization's archives, to work with University of Michigan or another archive to make sure that they're able to archive that kind of archival work could count as a kind of major scholarly product for tenure. And I think that's something that's really rare. So I think it also is thinking about how can we change the ways that we value scholarship, the kind of metrics that we have for valuing different kinds of scholarly products, to be able to invest in community engaged scholarship, in public facing scholarship in different ways. So thank you so much, Emily.
To your point, I think there is more motion behind how we approach promotion and tenure. I mean, I can only speak for KU, but I know that team science, community engagement, there is definitely I think we have more support in how we approach P&T and what are the measurements that people would get promotion and tenure from, and how do we continue. I'm going to say continue because I'm optimistic. How do we continue to involve community engaged work as a part of acknowledging the experience of these professors, of people that, that are doing the work? And it might not be something that is published, and it might not be speaking at national conferences. How do we value that? And that's something that I think as Frontiers, that's something that we're working on through KU. And obviously, Dr. Jamila Watson Thompson, they're working on that at the Lawrence campus as well. So, be on the lookout for that. But I do have another question. I had a bunch of questions, but I didn't want to take up all the time. Kathryn, were you ever checked when you came into the center, like, we don't know who you are, so stop talking to me, or any type of like pushback? And how did you take that? What did you do with that energy? And I think that this is important to know for those who want to enter into community and do this work. And it's not always, sunshine and roses. So if you can give just advice on how someone can approach community if they're interested, and work with them in that way.
Yeah. Well, so first one, I mean, when some of it was like I was saying, these kind of mechanisms that were in place to protect the center. So when I first approached them, they were like, we don't care that you have an MSW, that you've been doing this work. You're going to go through a 2-day long volunteer training where we go through like the really basics of how to enter the space. And then we're going to if you want to volunteer with us, we're going to put you where there's need right now. And that's the clothing closet. And I was truly, I mean, and part of this was that I was just starting this PhD program. I had the time to really invest in it in this way and to go through that process. And then I think I tried to be aware from the very beginning of not entering space, of not inserting myself into spaces that were not for me. So I actually include this in my dissertation, like a photo of me at a ball that was being run, but I'm like in the kitchen helping serve pizza. Like I was trying to not be in, if I was entering a space, it was as someone who was a volunteer or who was contributing in some way, and not trying to insert myself in that way. And I think my kind of to work at the pace of relationship. So really I had this relationship that I started with Dwayne, and then Dwayne could introduce me to someone and say, and I could be kind of vouched for in this way, that I was not this random person, this random researcher coming in and asking with a tape recorder and saying let me interview you. It was at the pace of relationships, but that really requires going at a kind of snail's pace.
Thank you so much. I didn't even realize it was 10 o'clock, and I'm the person that's supposed to know this. So it is 10 o'clock. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If someone does have a question, is it okay if they reach out to either one of you? Or Dwayne, would you prefer people go through Kathryn if they have a question for you?
Oh, it's perfectly fine. They can talk to me directly if they'd like, or if they need my information, they can get it from Katie. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I just dropped my email in the chat too.
Yeah, and I can post that too, actually.
Awesome. I thank you all again for your time and your experience and lending that to us today. And thank you to everyone who attended MARG meeting. And hopefully we will see you in June at our next meeting where we talk about the Kansas Health Rural Transformation Grant and how KU Medical Center is involved with that with Marty Ross. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.